50.5 million voters. I mean, they are gearing up for the absolute largest democratic exercise in Ethiopia's history.
Yeah, it's a massive scale. Over 10,900 candidates are on the ballot.
Right. So by all the, numerical metrics, June 1st, 2026 is slated to be this monumental triumph of civic engagement.
On paper, absolutely.
But then, so why are so many people completely convinced that the winner was chosen like months ago?
Well, it's the ultimate paradox of modern statecraft, really. I mean, you can scale up the infrastructure of voting to these unprecedented levels, but scaling up actual political competition, that requires dismantling the very structures that keep a ruling party secure.
And that tension is exactly what we are dissecting today. We are taking a deep dive into Ethiopia's 7th general election, but we are bypassing the official press releases.
Right, going a bit deeper.
Exactly. We want to focus on a highly specific structural argument that's dominating the political landscape right now. Basically, the claim that this massive logistical undertaking isn't a genuine election at all, but a highly orchestrated selection process.
Yeah, that's the core debate.
Now, before we jump into the mechanics of how that allegedly works, I need to establish some ground rules with you, the listener, because we are wading into a highly complex, deeply polarized environment here.
Very polarized.
So let me be perfectly clear. We do not take political sides. We are not endorsing Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's Prosperity Party, nor are we championing the opposition or the critics.
No, not at all.
Our only objective today is to impartially deconstruct the facts, the systems, and the underlying arguments contained in our sources so you can evaluate the landscape for yourself.
What's fascinating here is the collision between digital modernization and entrenched institutional habits. Because the official government narrative, it points to this undeniable leap in technological capacity and voter enfranchisement. But the critics, they're looking past the software updates to examine the enduring hardwiring of state power.
Okay, let's unpack this technological leap first, because you really cannot understand the critics' fears without first understanding the sheer scale of the tools that the government has rolled out. I mean, the centerpiece of this election is Mirchaye, right? The digital voter registration app.
Yeah, Mirchaye's. And this isn't just a simple web form.
Oh, not at all. We are talking about biometric data capture, offline syncing capabilities for rural areas without internet access, and a centralized deduplication server architecture designed to basically prevent anyone from registering twice.
It's highly sophisticated.
It is.
Okay.
And the National Election Board of Ethiopia, NEBE, managed to register 50.5 million people on this platform. Plus, they're doing this with heavy international backing.
Right, which is a huge point in their favor.
The United Nations Development Program is literally financing server infrastructure, and Japanese technical advisors have been directly involved in training poll workers and auditing the systems.
And those international partnerships are crucial to the government's argument for legitimacy. Having the UNDP actively monitoring the digital architecture, well, it provides a powerful counter-narrative to claims of fraud.
Yes, totally.
From a purely administrative standpoint, NEBE is operating with far more technical autonomy than any election board in the country's history.
Wait, but that doesn't add up to me. If you have the UNDP literally in the room watching the server logs and you have Japanese technicians auditing the digital architecture, how can critics confidently claim the numbers are cooked?
Right.
I mean, you can't just wave away 50 million biometrically verified voters and international observers by crying foul, right?
You're right, but here's the thing. You don't have to cook the server logs if you control the environment where the data is collected.
Oh, okay, yeah.
To understand the skepticism, you have to look at how the current ruling party, the Prosperity Party, has inherited and adapted the historical architecture of the EPRDF.
Ah, the old coalition.
Exactly. You already know how the old EPRDF coalition operated. I mean, they commanded massive dominant victories, sometimes claiming literally 100% of the seats.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that by hacking servers. They did it through the Kebli system, the hyperlocal neighborhood administrations.
Right, the 1-to-5 networks, where one party loyalist is essentially responsible for monitoring 5 households in their immediate neighborhood.
Yes. That deeply cellular level of surveillance and social control, it didn't just vanish when the Prosperity Party took over.
It's still there.
Exactly. So critics argue that while the NEBE might be independent of the federal headquarters in Addis Ababa, the actual point of contact for a voter out in a rural district is still the local party cadre.
I see.
And if that cadre controls access to state resources, the biometric app is really just a faster way to log an essentially mandated registration.
Okay, so it's less like a rigged ballot box and more like a rigged social media algorithm.
That's a good way to put it.
Like, the state machinery operates like a platform that shadow bans the opposition, right? Denying rally permits, throttling their message on state media,
Yeah.
while basically algorithmically boosting the ruling party to the front page every single day.
Right.
The opposition is allowed to exist on the platform, sure, but the code ensures they can never actually go viral.
That algorithm analogy perfectly describes the first major mechanism critics point to, which is resource asymmetry.
Right.
The blurring of state and party lines means the Prosperity Party doesn't just have a campaign budget. I mean, it has the entire apparatus of the state at its disposal.
Which is huge.
They campaign using government vehicles, they inaugurate massive public infrastructure projects right before polling, and they completely dominate the state-run broadcasting networks.
Yeah, and opposition parties, many of which are severely underfunded anyway, they simply cannot compete with the logistical reach of the federal government.
No, it's impossible.
Which feeds directly into the second mechanism. And this one is arguably much more dangerous than just unbalanced media coverage. I'm talking about the security and participation gaps.
Yes, this is critical.
We all know the profound complexities and ongoing conflicts in regions like Amhara and Oromia, but the critics are focused on the practical mechanics of how this localized instability actually functions as a voter suppression tool.
Right, because it fundamentally alters the physical reality of an election. I mean, when a region is placed under a state of emergency, or when military command posts take over local administration to fight insurgencies, normal political campaigning just becomes impossible.
Yeah, because it's not just about an abstract feeling of fear. It's about physical roadblocks.
It is about roadblocks. It's about arbitrary detentions under emergency decrees and the denial of travel permits.
Wow.
An opposition candidate from Addis Ababa physically cannot safely travel to hold a town hall in a volatile district in Amhara or Oromia.
Because it's too dangerous.
Exactly. Their organizers risk arrest, or honestly worse, if they are perceived as sympathetic to armed groups.
Right.
So, while the government might argue that the polling stations will be open and secured by federal forces on Election Day, the critics argue that an election isn't just about the day you cast the ballot.
Yeah, it's the whole lead up.
If the opposition was structurally prevented from organizing for the 6 months prior due to so-called security concerns, the outcome in those districts is heavily managed by default.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because if you look at the raw data, it seems to completely contradict the idea of a suppressed opposition.
How so?
Well, we have 10,900 candidates registered.
Right.
That is a staggering amount of political participation. It looks like the ultimate buffet of democratic choice, you know?
Well, it looks like choice, but functionally, in a first-past-the-post electoral system, it acts as a mechanism of dilution.
Oh, interesting.
This is what political scientists call the fragmentation strategy. You see, when you have a massive, well-resourced incumbent, the absolute worst thing for them is a unified, single opposition candidate who can consolidate all the protest votes.
Ah, I get it. It's kind of like a marathon where one runner actually owns the track.
Right.
And they control the water stations and they pay the referees, while the fragmented opposition, they're basically running barefoot, bumping into each other.
So think about the math. If a district has 100,000 voters and 60,000 of them are unhappy with the incumbent, you'd think the incumbent loses.
Logically, yeah.
But if those 60,000 protest votes are divided among 20 different microparties who can't form a coalition, no single opposition candidate gets more than, say, 3,000 votes.
Oh, wow. And meanwhile, the incumbent's solid base of 40,000 votes just easily wins the seat.
The math guarantees the incumbent's survival.
Right.
So critics argue that the system actively encourages this hyperfragmentation.
By doing what?
By lowering the barriers to entry for microparties, while simultaneously making it dangerous, or just structurally impossible, for major, unified opposition coalitions to organize nationwide.
That makes a lot of sense.
The ruling party ensures they never face a consolidated threat. The 10,000 candidates aren't a sign of a healthy democracy. They are a symptom of an opposition that has been systematically fractured.
So the real power struggle isn't happening between those 10,000 candidates on the ballot at all?
No, not really. The skeptics argue the actual decisions determining the country's trajectory are being made in closed-door party central committee meetings.
Yeah.
through elite bargaining among regional power brokers and within the security apparatus. The election is just the public ratification of those private bargains.
That brings us to the final piece of the critics' puzzle, which is how this all filters down to the average citizen holding that biometric registration card.
Right, the Mirchaye app.
Yeah. We talked about how the UNDP and Japan are monitoring the servers, but the source material highlights a massive red flag regarding data collection out in the field. There have been widespread documented reports of coercion during the voter registration phase using the app.
And this is where the digital veneer cracks. I mean, NEBE, the election board itself, actually had to issue official public warnings threatening to cancel the polls in certain local areas.
Really? Just cancel them outright?
Yeah. They did this because they received overwhelming reports that local administrators were forcing citizens to register.
And the mechanism for that coercion is incredibly direct. Like, it's not abstract intimidation.
No, not at all.
It's a local cable official telling a farmer that if they don't produce a digital receipt from the Mirchaye app proving they registered, they literally won't get their subsidized fertilizer for the planting season.
Exactly. Or telling a family they will be cut off from local food aid distribution.
Which is terrifying.
It is. When access to fundamental state services is implicitly or explicitly tied to political participation, the concept of a free choice just evaporates.
Yeah, completely.
The app might securely log the fingerprint, sure, preventing double voting, but the app cannot measure the duress under which that fingerprint was given.
That is such a good point.
And when the independent election board has to publicly acknowledge this level of coercion, it validates the deep historical mistrust citizens have. It reinforces this generational memory that elections are a compliance exercise managed by the state, not a mechanism for accountability.
Wow. Okay, so we have laid out a fairly bleak mechanical breakdown from the critics here. State resources acting as a shadow banning algorithm, military command posts preventing physical campaigning, a fragmented opposition ensuring mathematical victory for the incumbent, and, localized coercion tying basic survival to voter registration.
It's a heavy critique.
Very heavy. But we cannot end the analysis there. To grasp the full scope of this event, we have to examine the defense, because demanding flawless, textbook democratic execution from Ethiopia right now kind of ignores the intense reality of what it takes to actually govern the country.
Absolutely. The defenders of the process, including the highest levels of the Prosperity Party, they reject the selection narrative entirely.
Right.
They frame it as a cynical talking point deployed by opposition groups who have basically failed to build a compelling national platform. They point out that building a democracy in a deeply complex, historically fractured federation is inherently messy.
Yeah, Ethiopia is navigating ethnic tensions that threaten the very fabric of the federal state. I mean, it is managing profound economic inflation and debt restructuring.
It's a massive undertaking.
It is. It is actively trying to stabilize regions recovering from some of the most devastating internal conflicts of the 21st century. So defenders essentially ask, what is the alternative? Canceling the elections entirely until some magical state of perfect peace is achieved?
Right, because delaying the process indefinitely would plunge the country into a deeper constitutional crisis.
Exactly.
The defense argues that progress is iterative. Yes, the incumbent has advantages, as they do in every democracy globally, frankly.
It's true.
But they emphasize that pushing forward with 50 million registered voters, utilizing new technology that significantly cuts down on the outright ballot stuffing of previous decades, that is a necessary pragmatic step forward.
It's better than what was there before.
Exactly. They view the election not as a perfect finish line, but as a stabilizing mechanism that keeps the federal project moving while they manage these overlapping crises.
So what does this all mean for us? How do we reconcile the shiny new biometric kits with the allegations of behind-the-scenes power brokering? Like, how do we square this circle? We have an undeniably modern biometric infrastructure overseen by international bodies, operating within a system that still heavily relies on localized coercion and structural suppression to maintain control.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it forces us to redefine what an election actually is.
Okay, how so?
Well, the debate over whether June 2026 is an election or a selection highlights a fundamental truth about political science. Voting is only the final, smallest fraction of a democratic process.
The voting booth is just the roof of the house, basically.
Exactly. And you cannot build a roof without a foundation. A genuine election requires an independent judiciary that has the power to strike down those arbitrary roadblocks and emergency decrees.
Right.
It requires a free media ecosystem that can investigate state resource abuse without fear of imprisonment.
Yeah.
It requires the rule of law to protect a citizen's right to refuse registration without losing their fertilizer subsidies. And most critically, it requires a political culture where the ruling elite actually accepts the possibility of relinquishing power.
Man, yeah. If the underlying assumption of the entire state apparatus is that losing is an existential threat, that losing means prison or exile for the current elite, then every institution will inherently function to prevent that loss.
Regardless of how advanced the voting software is.
Exactly. The stakes for June 1st, 2026 are just immense.